How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jack Hartman, joined, as always, by my good friend, my co-host on the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well. At a little alternate location today. Background's looking a little different. Had a change of schedule for Bible study this morning, and it's a Friday morning, so a little bit of different scenery at my mom's house. Empty house, so shouldn't have anybody bothering me except maybe the cat who's over there sleeping on the couch, but should be a good time. Happy to be getting into it with you. Just a couple days away from the Super Bowl, 2 days away. Not really a Super Bowl that many people are excited about. A lot of people rooting for the meteor strike in this one, it seems like. But yeah, happy to be with you, Jack. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's a beautiful Friday down here in Central Texas, and we've got youth retreat this weekend, so super excited about that. But like you said, this Sunday is Super Bowl Sunday. And we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna preview that, talk about some things, some storylines in that. But before that, we had some interesting trade announcements happen this week. Not that trades happened because they can't, but we were told that by Cooper Kupp himself that the Rams are looking to trade him as soon as possible. And also, Myles Garrett has requested a trade from Cleveland. And so we're going to talk about those a little bit first, talk about maybe what those guys still have in the tank and what they're still – what a team that's trading for them is going to get, also what we think packages are going to look like. And we'll also play a little what team do we think would be a really, really good fit for them as well. So we'll start with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Rams. Obviously has had some incredible seasons there, is a Super Bowl champ, was there and started to make a name for himself when Jared Goff was the quarterback. But then, of course, once they traded for Matthew Stafford, then things really started to take off for him. He's battled injuries throughout his career, but when he is healthy, he is one of the most and best productive wide receivers that we have in the league. And so, Nick, first of all, do you think this is a good move for the Rams to move on from him?
I just feel like if the Rams are wanting to move on from Kupp, like you got to start feeling like they're thinking about a timeline of post Matthew Stafford, because Stafford and Kupp have obviously made great music together. Kupp was the Triple Crown winner in 2021 when they won the Super Bowl, Stafford's first year with the Rams. So it feels like they've been on this Matthew Stafford timeline. He's 36 years old, I believe. And I feel like them feeling so confident that they're going to trade Kupp maybe makes me as a fan feel like, hey, is Stafford coming to the end of the road here? Are the Rams going to be a sneaky team thinking about quarterback in the draft or looking at a free agent? And so I feel like that's how I'm kind of feeling about Kupp. If that's what they're thinking, I think sure, go for it. If you're thinking Stafford's got 1-2 years left in the tank, then like, why are you trying to trade him now? Just wait a year or two. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I feel like it really is a timeline thing. We've obviously seen other teams try and straddle multiple timelines. The Warriors in the NBA have tried to straddle 2 timelines, and it's turned out really messy, obviously, in the last couple of years. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Stick with one timeline, either Stafford and Kupp, maybe try trade both of those guys, or you want to keep both of those guys and stay in contention right now for maybe a year or two.
Yeah, my pushback to that would be that I think the Green Bay Packers are the best example of this currently. Is they kept Rodgers, but they did move on from the we're contending right now timeline a little bit, like thinking we still have Aaron Rodgers, which means we can still be competitive. But let's also kind of prepare for what's next, including, trading Devontae Adams, but not trading Aaron Rodgers, drafting young receivers, not early draft pick young receivers, but still drafting young receivers, really building up that defense and free agency and stuff, so that when they moved on from Rodgers and Jordan Love stepped in, since he's been a starter, they've made the playoffs both years. And so if the Rams are thinking that way, I think that could be really good. They've got a young and really, really good defense, especially that front seven of theirs looked really, really good this year.
Mhm.
Kyron Williams has really come into his own. Puka Nacua has really come into his own.
Mhm.
So I could see a world where they move on from Kupp. They move on from those bigger pieces, and not Stafford yet. Let him play through the contract. Maybe there's been talk this year about, hey, they could be in a position that they take a quarterback, in round one, or round two if they like him. I think round one would be unwise, but definitely at the end of round two, taking a quarterback, maybe that's the third or fourth quarterback that comes off the board,
Mhm.
that then could, work a couple years under Matthew Stafford, does he have 1 or 2 years left? I think he has 2 years left
I
on his
believe so.
contract.
I
Yeah,
believe so.
so work under him for a couple years and then try to turn the reins over. I think if they pull it off, I think it could work really, really well. But obviously, that's the question is like, do they do it right?
Mhm. Yeah, I feel you there. If we're talking about like the Rodgers Green Bay timeline, like Rodgers and Adams were still together. So Jordan Love sat for 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers. 2 years
Mhm.
were with Devontae Adams. One was an NFC champion year in 2020, where the NFC championship was against the Bucks that they lost in Green Bay, I believe. Then
Mhm.
2021, they lost to San Francisco, I believe, in the game where they had a punt blocked for a touchdown, I believe, by Hufunga.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then
walk off field goal.
yeah. And then 2022, which was Rodgers' last year with the Packers, they finally traded Devontae Adams. And it was a disaster, though, as far as the offense was completely out of sync and they didn't make it to the playoffs. That's the
Right.
year that Detroit crushed them as far as their hopes in the last week of the season, if we remember correctly. But
Yeah.
so I feel like the trading the safety blanket receiver to your older quarterback, it's like, sure, maybe you're going in on a young quarterback and have this old quarterback for them to wait behind. But I don't know why that would precipitate needing to trade Cooper Kupp at that point. Like, I guess you could, but why not draft your quarterback in the second round or whatever to wait behind Stafford and keep Kupp? Like, you don't need to trade Kupp right now if
It's
you
true.
have Stafford. I feel like the two should be tied together, and I don't get why you wouldn't. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I guess the only um yeah, and it's not like he's going into the last year of his contract. He has 2 more years on his contract. So
Mhm.
maybe it's also just we don't want to be spending the money on him right now, spending that much money on him.
Mhm.
But yeah, so let's talk trade value. What do we think that the Rams would be able to get in exchange for Cooper Kupp? Especially, I think wide receivers, they're like they're how much they're worth. You actually get more at the trade deadline than you do in the off season because you have teams that are like, hey, if we can get this piece, then that'll really help us and set us up moving forward into our playoff push, as opposed to right now, the Eagles and the Chiefs will have just played in the Super Bowl. It's like there are a lot of teams that it's like, hey, we aren't really sure where we're at. I think if this had been in the middle of the season, right at the trade deadline, I think Washington would have been the team that would have really jumped on that and would have been willing to pay a good bit for him. So I don't think his value is actually as high now as it would be, come trade deadline of next season. But what do you think that the Rams would be able to get in exchange for him?
I feel like you're looking at like a third round pick and like maybe a fourth, maybe a fifth, like something like that. I feel like his value is almost kind of Amari Cooper-ish, where he got traded for a third and there was some swap action going on the back end of that deal between
Mm-hmm.
the Bills and the Browns this year at the trade deadline. So I kind of feel like the value's around there. I feel like I could see a team overpaying and doing like a second, but I think a first is pretty out of the question at this point for Kupp, I would say. I
Definitely.
don't I feel like it also depends where we've heard reports of the Rams basically saying like, "Hey, we're willing to eat some dead money on this. We're willing to take some of this contract on while we trade him." So I could see like maybe the Rams take on a big chunk of the contract and they trade him for a second round pick or something like that. Or they take on none of the contract and trade him for a third round pick, period. And that's about it. But I feel like he's right there, right about in the middle. Where I feel like if you're looking at the trade deadline this last year, like Amari Cooper went for a third-ish. Would Cooper Kupp, I don't remember how healthy he was at the trade deadline. Would you have gotten like a third-round pick and a fourth-round pick and a sixth-round pick or something like that? I feel like you could get that kind of value, maybe pushed to like a second, maybe. So I feel like that's the kind of ballpark we're talking about. Some valuable day two picks, but not the highest end kind of picks that way. Where do you
that's
with that?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think day two pick, maybe day two pick plus like a sixth or a seventh, and I think that's the case if it is a third round pick. I think it would be like third round pick, sixth round pick, or second round pick, or seventh round pick, sort of a thing. Would be what the Rams are looking at, which in this draft, and we haven't talked a ton about the draft, though we talked about some guys that impressed at the Senior Bowl and the East-West Bowl last week. But looking at this draft, what's really, really interesting is there are so many guys that would have been vying for top 5 picks that are now top 15. And top 15 picks that might be in the second round because of injuries, because we had a lot of these high level guys get injured this last year. And obviously, teams need to do their due diligence on those, medical evaluations. But there's a good chance that you're getting a guy that at one point was projected in the first round in the second round because of that, or because production was down, but you also just look at him and he's got those physical attributes that are, far above, some of the guys that might get taken ahead of him. And so a second round pick could end up being really, really valuable. Like, I feel like a little bit more valuable than it would be in years past. Especially for a team like the Rams, we were talking about maybe taking a quarterback in the second round. That could be of high value this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm there with you. I feel like guys like Siobhan Ravel or Josh Simmons at Ohio State, like those are dudes who like really injured their knees badly, who projected like have the athletic tools, have the tape potentially to be day one players, but because of injury, as you said, might be going late first round or second round.
Right.
But yeah. I will say, though, I feel like top of this draft picks don't seem to be as valuable, at least to me, where if you're looking at a draft where you're getting like Hutchinson in the top 2, or like a Myles Garrett or a Patrick Mahomes or a Lattimore or like one of those dudes, this draft I don't feel like has those kind of dudes where like early first round studs, like a Micah Parsons, like a Jamar Chase, like those kind of guys. This draft isn't necessarily deep at the top as far as superstars, but I do feel like, as you're saying, like you get into the middle and there's some interesting dudes who could turn into high value dudes. So I'm there with that. You might get more value in the middle of this draft.
Yeah, I feel like picks 6 through 10 you'll be getting a player that would be the caliber if this were a different year, like, 10 through 15 or maybe 12 through 17, because I mean, personally, I think Abdul Carter is up there with edges like Hutch and Myles Garrett when it comes to what you're getting out of him. If you draft him, worthy of a top 2 pick. But yeah, outside of him, outside of Travis Hunter, like obviously we know Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are going to go high, but I think you and I both agree that is a team needing a quarterback, drafting a guy there that if you were just putting him on the big board, he would not be in the top 10 players available in the draft. So anyway, we're obviously we're going to talk a lot about the draft, here in the, after this week, it'll just be draft and free agency, and it's going to be awesome. But so let's talk teams that we think might go and try and make a deal for Cooper Kupp. And I think that we should be viewing this from the perspective of that team wants that guy. That team would get better by getting that guy. That team has a hole that he would fill really, really well. But also taking into account, like, I don't think the Rams are going to trade Cooper Kupp within the NFC West, right? Like, so we do need to think about that a little bit. So Nick, why don't you go first? Give me a team that is on your list.
So I have a handful of teams here. I feel like the way that I kind of view this is definitely looking at teams that are contending now that maybe have more of a veteran quarterback. We're kind of limited in the teams that have veteran quarterbacks in the league, where there's been a youth movement as far as the quarterbacks. But first one that I'll lead with as far as a veteran type team, I feel like the Bills, they obviously went after Amari Cooper during the trade deadline this year. He was on a 1-year contract, or the last year of his contract, so he's going to be a free agent. I could definitely see them being like, okay, could Cooper Kupp be our big slot that could be reliable in those third down situations where Kincaid dropped a pass in a clutch situation, where you have guys like Shakir, where you have other dudes like Keon Coleman who are going to step up and be your nice other players who really fit into roles really well. But could this be your third down clutch, big play, has postseason experience in the biggest spots kind of dude? And I think Cooper Kupp can still be the tight end of wide receivers in the playoffs kind of guy. So I feel like the Bills, it could be a really good, reliable pass catching fit with Josh Allen.
Yeah, I had the Bills on my list because I think that would be really, really good for them. Would be a great guy to get. It's not exactly the same, but it reminds me of how good Cole Beasley was for the Bills and how good Cole Beasley was for Josh Allen when he was there. Just as that's like you said, third down, slot type, gonna run a really, really good textbook route that's just going to get open. You need 3 yards. He's going to run a 4-yard out and he's going to get it type thing. And obviously Cooper Kupp has far greater skills and a far bigger skill set than Cole Beasley. But in terms of the security blanket that could be, just your surefire receiver in those situations, I think absolutely. The guy that I have at the top of my list, I think that the Rams doing this would be doing good by Cooper Kupp. But also I think this is a team that could absolutely use Cooper Kupp, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. I think you keep Kupp in LA, that's where his family is. Obviously he's been there his whole career. So the Rams are doing good by Kupp by keeping him there. The Rams are keeping him out of the NFC. Like you could say, obviously the Rams don't want to trade him within the NFC West. They probably don't want to trade him within the NFC at all. So you keep him out of the NFC. But also, man, I know a lot of people love to say this. A lot of people love to say that we give Herbert way too much credit. Like he gets more slack than any quarterback in the NFL. But I mean, look at the receivers that the man has had throughout his career. Yes, he had Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen was great. Look at what he did this year with Quentin Johnston as his best wide receiver. Right? Imagine
Lad McConkey. What? Wait.
Oh, Lad McConkey, right?
I'm like, wait, Quentin Johnston.
Yeah. Going into the year, we're like, Quentin Johnston's wide receiver 1, really? But Lad McConkey emerged, absolutely. But I mean, I feel like we saw in the playoff game, Houston was like, we're not going to let you really get the ball to Lad McConkey. And because of that, you have to go elsewhere, and it didn't work. It did not go well. And so I think that this would be a great move for the Chargers to get, a veteran wide receiver, a sure thing, a sure commodity in Cooper Kupp, that can alleviate some of the pressure from Lad McConkey, can help teach Lad McConkey and let Lad McConkey really come into his own, because obviously the skill set is there, the raw ability, but it's like, we see with a lot of rookies, okay, you had the raw ability and you did what you did your rookie year, but now you've got stuff on tape and defenses are able to slow you down. Not all the time, Justin Jefferson is a great example of that didn't happen. Jamar Chase is a great example of that didn't happen. But there have been other wide receivers have had, a great rookie year. And since then, it's like, okay. I think Jalen Waddle is a good example of that. I think we all expected Garrett Wilson to be that much better this year with Aaron Rodgers. And, whether that was Rodgers, whether that was Nathaniel Hackett, whether that was Wilson, there was some disconnect there, right? And so getting a veteran receiver like Kupp in there to help teach Ladd McConkey, to give Herbert another surefire target, I think would be really, really good for the Chargers.
Yeah. I really like that. That actually didn't cross my mind as a fit, but I really do like that. I feel like Kupp and McConkey would be a little bit of duplication as far as primarily slot dudes, primarily dudes that run kind of in-breaking routes, kind of just sit down in the zone kind of dudes. But that would be an all-time white trio offensive core, which would be a lot of fun. I think it would be fun. I think the fit makes a ton of sense. I can see Kupp in that Chargers uniform already. So I really love that fit. That's really fun. I also feel like Kupp would be a really willing blocker in the physical run it down your throat kind of Chargers offense. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. I really like that. Another team that I kind of like as far as a fit would be the Packers. We kind of talked about them as far as the Aaron Rodgers comp earlier, but the Packers are kind of in this getting Jordan Love more comfortable, the variety of wide receivers that are threatening kind of thing. I feel like they've got the collection of 4 dudes who can all beat you in different ways. But I feel like as of right now, Jaden Reed looks really good on any given week. Then you have Dobbs, who can make a big play here or there. And then you have Watson, who's injured, but he's your vertical, fast, run by you kind of guy, but he's injured right now. But I feel like Kupp would be a dude who would make Jordan Love smarter. And I'm not saying that Jordan Love's stupid, but I feel like he's a dude that we've heard Cooper Kupp, obviously, in post-game interviews be like, oh, yeah, this was a fire zone. Z32 right was the play call. And the moment they blitzed off the edge, I knew to sit down in this spot and then move off it. Kupp can break down the game and can really understand what a defense is doing and kind of figure his way through it. And I think his ability to almost coach up Jordan Love and get comfortable with him and get Jordan Love to do more of the quarterbacky things rather than the running around off your back foot, lollipop kind of ball over the middle kind of thing. I feel like Kupp could really help Jordan Love as a developmental, contending but not at the end of your window kind of team. And so I really think the Packers would be a fun kind of fit. They obviously haven't really traded for receivers or drafted a receiver with the number 1 pick, but I really think it could be a nice middle of the road, really good for everybody kind of fit there with the Packers.
Yeah, I had Green Bay on my list as well. I think it really speaks volumes. Josh Jacobs said this week, hey, what's the thing that the Packers are missing? And he said a number 1 wide receiver, and he didn't do it disrespectfully. He gave props to the receivers that they have, but said listen, they're young guys and, we need somebody, we keep talking about Cooper Kupp. I feel like the best word to use for him is surefire thing. He is consistent. He is who he is, and who he is really good. And, you're not going to get a bad game from him. All of those receivers that you mentioned that the Packers had, they all have really, really high ceilings and really, really low floors for games, that just comes with inexperience and youth. Your ceiling isn't necessarily going to get higher the more years you get in the league, but your floor is going to come up. You're going to get more consistent. And so yeah, I had Green Bay on my list as well. For a guy there. I'm going to say Baltimore because it's sort of the tale as old as time is that Baltimore doesn't have receivers, or the tale as old as time since Lamar Jackson has been there. I think Zay Flowers has the chance to be a really, really good, consistent wide receiver in the NFL. But, Rashad Bateman has shown flashes and also has had some really poor games as well. They tried to do, or they traded for, what's his name? Deontay Johnson. They traded for Deontay Johnson. It didn't work. They cut him. The Ravens or the Texans picked him up. The Texans cut him. The Ravens picked him up so that they could get a compensatory pick. He wasn't allowed to play or anything, and so yeah. So I mean, they need a guy. We already talked about Kupp's and willingness to do so, and with how run centered the Ravens offense is. When it's firing at all cylinders and working at its best, how run centered it is. There have been times that Ravens offensive coordinators have forgotten that they can hand off the ball, which doesn't make any sense. But when they're at their best, they are running the ball and running it down throats. And I think that Cooper Kupp would fit right in with that and would do a great job there.
Mm-hmm. I really like that fit too. Didn't cross my mind necessarily, but I feel like it's the same thing as the Bills of clutch third down dude. Mark Andrews had a struggle in his playoff loss. Kincaid had a struggle with a drop in his playoff loss. Kupp's not going to drop those balls. Kupp will not drop a clutch playoff third down kind of ball, third down, fourth down kind of ball. He will make that play when you need him most in that spot. He will block for you. The Ravens ask their receivers to block. I think he'd be a really good fit in Baltimore too. I'll just throw out for my last one. Obviously, my Steelers need a receiver. I think we'd be willing to trade a pick, definitely. I just feel like the Steelers, George Pickens is a super freak talent. Like, we've all seen the insane catches, the insane break a tackle, make a move, 75-yard reception run. Like, we've seen him do all that. We know what he's capable of. But as a Steelers fan who watches every game, every snap by the dude, he's a pain in the butt. He's still got so much maturing to do, so much growing to do. He still has to, like, I remember from his rookie year during the preseason, you'd see him shove a dude over blocking in the run game. You'd see him just deck a dude. You'd see him put in effort with some of the little things there. And I haven't seen him do that once in the last year or so. I've seen him make weird, like, not being disciplined with his feet, not toe dragging, the double toe tap, but the same foot twice thing when it's like, dude, just put both feet down. You're smarter than this. You're better than this. The random drops, the being dramatic on the sideline, the being dramatic in game, interception weirdness happening. Like, I just feel like he's somebody who I'm more concerned about than anything else. And so I'd prefer to get an adult in the room who's able to teach him the little things, who might be somebody who, if Russell Wilson's back, which the reports now are that he probably isn't going to be back, actually. Mm-hmm. The Steelers wouldn't prefer him potentially. But if Russ is there, I think he could work really well with Russ. If Fields there, I think that he could help Fields, as I was saying he could with Love. And so I feel like the Steelers would be really nice. They've been seeking another receiver to go with George Pickens, and I think he'd really make everybody else slot a little bit better. You have one last team you're thinking about here, Jack?
Yeah, and first I just want to say I think, I don't think that the Steelers are like, a biased pick by you at all. Like, the Steelers, I mean, I can't remember a time that the Steelers didn't have a drama queen diva baby in their wide receiver room, and typically was their wide receiver one. George Pickens, before him, Deontay Johnson, before him, Juju Smith-Schuster, before him, Antonio Brown, going back to guys like Santonio Holmes and Mike Wallace. Like, there's always been somebody, right? Basically since the 2005 Super Bowl win, there's always been somebody in that room that is causing issues. And I continue to say over and over, when there's wide receivers available, like, this is a veteran that not only is a veteran by age, but by maturity as well. And the Steelers need to go get him to like knock some sense into this locker room. Right. And so I definitely think that Kupp to the Steelers makes a lot of sense, and also diversifies the pass game a little bit more. I think that's a good pick. My last one would be the New England Patriots, which you have Drake May, and you don't really have many people that he's throwing the ball to. He made a lot of guys look far better than they are at the end of this last season. Once he got the reins in New England, I think Cooper Kupp will be a great fit there. Great, veteran receiver who would be willing to do the dirty work, willing to have patience with a young, very very talented quarterback. And I think that would just be almost a match made in heaven between Drake May and Cooper Kupp. All right, now let's talk about Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett publicly requested a trade this week. All signs are pointing that the Browns are not planning to trade him, not looking to trade him, but also now that he's publicly said that, teams are going to call and offer packages, of course, to Cleveland, and we'll see. Maybe there will be something that will entice them enough, considering the situation that they're in, considering that they are not able to be competitive until they get out of the Deshaun Watson contract, and having another very massive contract in the books also isn't helping them even be slightly competitive right now and in the near future. So, Nick, what do you think it's going to take to get Cleveland to be willing to budge and part ways with Myles Garrett?
I feel like as far as value, we're looking at, like, when we're talking about the hypothetical value, we're talking about like picks and players and stuff. But I feel like you also got to talk about approximate like round value, because like a first round pick, if it's 1 or 32, has very different value, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the abstract, we're talking about like 2 first round picks and something like a second or a third or a player or something like that. I feel like the abstract is like 2 firsts and a chunk. I feel like if we're talking actually, like if we're talking about firsts that are like Washington or like the Bills, where it's like, oh, their pick's number 27, their pick's number 30. It's like, well, that's a trash pick, and you really aren't getting much value at all. Like Myles Garrett for the 30 pick this year and the 31 pick next year, like that is not good enough value at all.
Right.
So I feel like potentially if you're talking first round picks, like maybe you go like, if you're going to a contender, I feel like it's got to be like maybe even 3 first round picks if you know the team's going to be really good. But I feel like if you're talking about a mid first round pick this year, then it might be like mid, like number 16 pick next year's first and another first, maybe even. Myles Garrett's potentially like the best player to be traded in a long, long, long time, I feel like. Mm-hmm. Outside of quarterbacks, I think you're talking about like him, Khalil Mack, a couple of other dudes who are outside of their prime. I think Myles Garrett's still on the tail end of his prime, still in his prime. But like Khalil Mack went for 2 first round picks and something, I think. And Myles Garrett's better than Khalil Mack. Like you and I just know that he is. And Khalil Mack's a damn good player. He's really, really good. Mm-hmm. I think he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory before his career kind of cooled off a little bit later in his career. But I feel like that's kind of what you're looking at as far as like multiple first round picks. I don't think the Browns would value quality players right now, because it feels like the moment you trade Garrett, you're going into a full reset. Like the moment you trade Garrett, Denzel Ward's going to be like, now trade me. It's my time. I'm done. And so I feel like you kind of got to go full reset, throw Deshaun Watson out the window, throw Garrett out there, throw Denzel Ward out there. Nick Chubb probably shouldn't be re-signed at that point. I feel like if you're going to trade Garrett, you got to go full reset. I'm very much into take the one path, don't try and split it up. So I feel like that's what I'm kind of looking at. Probably more picks than players, and probably a lot of picks, like 2 firsts and 2 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to take a haul, but I think he's worth it. I think Myles Garrett going into this year at the age of 30 is still better than 99% of the edge rushers in the NFL.
Yep.
And he probably will be past this year as well. Also that good. So again, let's go back and forth, team by team. I mean, not team by team like we're doing all 32, but some teams that we were interested or we think that these teams would be interested in getting him.
Mm-hmm. I have one clear favorite pick in this whole bunch of Myles Garrett teams. You obviously we've talked about an edge rush need for your Lions, but I actually have a team that I think is even more fun than that. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers trading for Myles Garrett will be so fun. A Baker, Myles Garrett, 2 former Browns first round back-to-back year picks, number 1 overall picks. And I feel like you're just for me, Vita Vea is obviously a stud. They have other dudes who are good edge rushers, good defensive linemen. But I feel like that dude to just take over a game from the edge position would make it so much easier for their back end, so much easier for their defense overall. And I feel like they're in that window of middle of contending-ish, definitely playoff type team who's really gotten better over the years, but not one of these young teams where you're not talking about a rookie contract quarterback. You're talking about Baker Mayfield, who's in his mid-late 20s, who has Mike Evans, who's in his 30s, who has the linebacker Levante David, who's in his 30s. You got Vita Vea, who's not on his rookie contract either. You've got a bunch of veteran players. You've got a bunch of dudes who know how to win Super Bowls. You've got a bunch of dudes with chips on their shoulder who would want this one chip to go in to push them over the top. And I would just love a Baker, Myles Garrett, Tampa Bay team. I think that would be so fun. So that's my number one. I think it would just be the most fun thing in my mind.
Interesting. I could see it. Yeah, I could see it. The teams that you had, I also had. They are not a team that I have here on my list. But a team that I do have on my list from the same division is the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta is sort of coming into a window of productivity, of winning now. Michael Penix Jr. is going to be their quarterback moving forward. They've got him cheap, so they've got a chance to get a guy like Myles Garrett and use him now before they'll have to pay Michael Penix Jr. The Matthew Judon thing just didn't really work out the way they had hoped this year, but I think if you pair him with Myles Garrett, then that's how you're going to get the best production out of Matthew Judon as well. I think if you do that, then the Falcons are by far above and ahead everybody else in that division as well. I think that would be a good move for Atlanta to make.
Mm-hmm. I think that's super fun. I feel like Atlanta's needed an edge rusher since the Vic Beasley era of 2016 when he had 16 and a half or something like that. It was Vic Beasley, and who was the other one? There was one other edge rusher who was kind of nice. I'm thinking Claymore was a rusher there. They've just had a mess at the edge rusher position for the better part of a decade, to be honest. I can't name another quality edge rusher as far as a dude who's gotten double-digit sacks there, I don't think. Mm-hmm. They've done the Bud Dupree thing, the Matthew Judon thing. They've done these veteran, injury-prone, weird kind of thing. I don't think they've invested that much as far as draft, but it just feels like they've had a mess at edge rusher that Myles Garrett could easily clean up. Where you put Myles Garrett in there, every single edge rusher on your team becomes a quality rotational number 2, number 3 dude. You have a much better pass rush from that kind of look. For me, I feel like I won't pick them as far as who to spiel on about, but I feel like the Bills and the Chiefs are also in this kind of department where it feels like these teams that are fighting for Super Bowls that just need that kind of one more thing. I feel like the Chiefs already have a haul of riches on both sides of the ball, have just such depth, such quality. And just like Myles Garrett would be incredible and would take him to the next level. especially if they're going for like a four-peat next year or something crazy. That would just be insane. But I feel like the Bills try and be like Von Miller was a disaster of a free agency signing. And so it would kind of make sense that way. The other team I'll kind of let rip here is a team that we've already talked about ad nauseum today. That'd be the Los Angeles Rams. I feel like if you got Stafford, if you don't trade Kupp, then just go in and be like, okay, Myles Garrett is our Aaron Donald, is our dude on the defense to take us to the next level, to be like, okay, let's make one last run at this thing. Let's try and rip off a Super Bowl right here at the end of Matt Stafford's career. And so I feel like the Rams, that F them picks kind of mentality, they could really just go all in, push all the chips into the middle right now doing that.
Yeah. I think the Bills would do like, man, like they need this, right? Like this isn't a like this would be a nice luxury to have. Like, no, they need this. Unfortunately, if we were talking about the Rams not wanting to trade Cooper Kupp within the division, maybe not the conference, I think that is tenfold here with the Browns with Myles Garrett. If I am Cleveland, and if you are an AFC team coming to me, you need to add another first-round pick onto your offer. Like maybe not that drastic, but your offer can't be the same as a team from the NFC. Like that's just not going to roll. So if Buffalo is willing to do it, then I think it would work wonders. It would be the best thing out there, best move that they could make. The Rams is interesting because of how successful these young guys are that they have. I feel like if they wanted to do an F them picks type move, there are other places that would make more sense to allocate those picks before Myles Garrett, though I completely agree that he would absolutely change the trajectory of that team from, okay, we're looking at life past Matthew Stafford to no, we're still in a Super Bowl window. So, and who knows, maybe them getting him would, like you said, stop them then from trading Cooper Kupp and be like, no, let's try to run it back. So yeah. Another team that I have, and this is one of those that's similar to the Falcons, that would actually have a first-round pick of value in the middle for me, is another NFC West team in the Seattle Seahawks. When we were sort of looking at this, thought about like, I feel like the Seahawks are just sort of in this weird limbo of like, are we competitive or are we not? And in thinking about that, I went and examined their roster, and they do not have an edge on their roster that moves the needle whatsoever. They don't have a defensive end on their roster that like I even just like I read that name and I immediately recognize. It's like I read that name and I have to like think a sec and be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I know who that is. And so I think if they are serious about like, no, like the NFC West is always a weird division. Like seriously, it's always a weird division. We're continuing a streak of back in like the Harbaugh days of the Niners either not making the playoffs or going to the NFC Championship game, right? Yeah. And within that, we had Seattle win a Super Bowl and we had Los Angeles win a Super Bowl. And we had Arizona make an NFC Championship game, I think.
They did, 2015.
Yeah. So it is a weird division. It is, like we talk about the dogfight that is the AFC North. It feels like every year. The NFC West isn't a dogfight, but it's just as sporadic, and it's not as bad as the NFC least, but it's just as sporadic when it comes to division winners and who's representing that division. And so I feel like if you're Seattle, you have to look at it and be like, I mean, it's not like we have to go and do a rebuild right now, right? Like there is still, this is anybody's game, and I think getting a Myles Garrett could tip the scales in their favor.
I like that. I like that a lot. Seattle, I agree. It feels like they've been in this middle tier of like, okay, since the let Russ cook kind of days in the post Super Bowl Russ era, into this Geno Smith kind of era. It's like, okay, are we gonna be that 9-8, maybe make the playoffs, probably miss, but like borderline? And they've been living in the borderline. They've been living in it. Back to back 9-8 years. Made the playoffs, I believe, 2 years ago. Was it 2 or 3 years ago with Geno? Geno had one good year 3 years ago, I think. His rest
That would have been that was
3 years ago.
That
Oh
was
yeah,
the
not this year, not last year, the year before that. Yeah. Yeah. And so I agree with you that like maybe I guess, but if Myles Garrett, as he said in the memo that he sent out, if his goal is to win a Super Bowl, I just don't know why Garrett will want to go there to Seattle. And in my head, like if I imagine Myles Garrett in a Seahawks jersey, it's just a little weird.
Oh yeah.
But like I could imagine him in like a Bucks jersey. Like Myles Garrett in a Bucks jersey makes sense in my head. But I don't know. I'm there with you though that it kind of makes some sense there. A lot of bottom dwelling teams that I think should be avoiding trading for Myles Garrett, who hopefully will not make that mistake. Sure. Not that Myles Garrett's a mistake, but like Carolina, please do not trade for either of these dudes. Please do not sell your future when you've got Bryce Young finally looking a little better. Like build around him a little, try and build a good football team, take best player available. Like your team sucks. Just stop sucking, please.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you have any more Myles Garrett teams? Because I've got a couple more if you don't.
I'll just dip my toes in I think the Lions pairing him with Hutchinson. You obviously will have more to say than I do on that. I think that Hutchinson's just in that spot where I think it was his third season this year that was obviously cut short, but I think it was year 3. So I think 2 years more with the first round pick, 5th year option contract, I believe. So I just feel like though, if you're talking about Myles Garrett 3 years from now, and Hutchinson on a new deal, you're talking about like 60 plus million allocated to 2 dudes who are 2 edge rushers. So maybe it will get hairy then. But I feel like from the Lions, because they've been good and they've been on this trajectory, that like they need to be like 2 first round picks, 2 second round picks. But like I'd still be very worried about that secondary. Obviously, you'd get a hell of a pass rush, but I'd be pretty concerned about that secondary. But I'll let you just kind of light that thing on fire because I think you definitely got a lot to say if you want to talk Lions there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, a second edge is a big need for them. Now, personally, as much as I would love to see Myles Garrett in a Lions uniform, I would rather them not trade for him. Like you said, allocate resources to the secondary, including bringing back Carlton Davis, who they brought in on a 1-year deal. Get some of these other guys that might be leaving, keep them. Certainly.
Season.
What was that?
Carry on Arnold season. Need him to play well.
Well, he's a glorified special teams player. I'm not even joking.
No.
But no, hey, lock down Brian Branch, lock down Kirby Joseph. I would rather wait because one, we haven't seen what Zadarius Smith looks like across from Aiden Hutchinson. So I think there were a lot of Lions fans that were expecting Zadarius Smith to come in and be just like Aiden Hutchinson. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew that he was, a step up from what we had, but he's not on that Bosa, Hutchinson, Watt, Garrett level, Matt Crosby level. Like he's not there. Right. So yes, it was going to help, but it wasn't going to bring us back to the promised land. So when it comes to the Lions with the edge position, what I would like them to do, not allocate resources to the edge yet. Let's see Hutchinson and Smith together a little bit. If we still feel like we need to upgrade, then wait another year and go and give the Raiders an offer they can't refuse for Max Crosby. Like I like Crosby just as a fit better with Detroit and with the culture. He went to Eastern Michigan, 40 minutes away from Detroit. Like
Mhm.
he knows Detroit. He knows what Michigan is like. And I just his no, and again that like I say all of this like Myles Garrett wouldn't work, and that's not true. But you still Crosby's still under contract for the 2025 and the 2026 season.
Mhm.
And so there's a chance that when we get to a year from now, the Raiders might be willing to move on from him and trade him. And so I'd rather, okay, let's see what Zadarius Smith and Hutch is like, and then maybe go and make a move for Crosby.
Mhm. I'm there with you. I feel like Crosby, though, would take a really big return like you'd be talking about with Garrett. So I just feel like pick your favorite flavor, pick which one's a little easier to obtain. But both of them, I think, will be studs across from Hutch potentially. So
Yeah, and Crosby's a little younger, so you have that going for you.
yeah.
He hasn't won Defensive Player of the Year, so when it comes to contract, there's one less notch in his belt when it comes to what you'd have to pay. The last team that I want to talk about though for Myles Garrett is the Washington Commanders. They similar to Houston last year, where all right, we're coming in with a rookie quarterback. Our window isn't quite open yet, but we've got this guy. And then they had the year that they had, and they're like, okay, our window is now, right? Our window is now. We were thinking we were like, a year, maybe 2 years from this, but our window is open now. And Houston, credit to them, they tried to capitalize on it. It didn't work this year, but they weren't complacent. Like, well, we're a year ahead, so we're gonna hold the horses on trying to go get guys. They're like, no, okay, we're here now. Let's go get Stephon Diggs. Let's go get some of these other guys. And so I'd love to see Washington take the same approach, take the same mindset, get an absolute game wrecker and game changer there on the defensive line at the edge position for them, that can, really, really help to take over a game from the defensive side of the ball, which I feel like right now is the side between the two that's lacking more.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I feel like for me, I'd be kind of concerned if I was Washington to do that because Washington already sent a boatload of picks to New Orleans for Lattimore this year, where they sent it was like a second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Like they sent just a ton of picks over, and their defense still sucked. Like they just sent a bunch of picks over, and their defense was still terrible. And I think Myles Garrett would help, but I think their defense just isn't very good. Like I just think even if you add Garrett, it's like, okay, you added Garrett, and now the defense is like number 16, number 15, number 14 in the league. And your offense is still really good, but isn't even really talented. Like their offense is very much Lamar Jackson early with the Ravens, where it's like, okay, they got Mark Andrews and old Mark Ingram. Okay, they've got Mark Andrews and not Kenny Stills, Kenny, the other one who was on the Saints. Now they're just massive, really mediocre receivers. It's like, okay, Washington's got Terry McLaurin and old Zach Ertz. Terry McLaurin and Brian Robinson playing okay, old Austin Eckler. Like it just feels like their offense isn't even that talented and their defense isn't even that talented, and they kind of overachieved. So I'd be more concerned about depth and a ton of players you kind of need to get in there and really need to hit on some picks. But that's kind of just me, where I think adding Myles Garrett, could you get to another NFC championship if you go on a run like this? Sure, maybe. But are you winning a Super Bowl adding Myles Garrett? I doubt you're winning a Super Bowl next year with Myles Garrett as Washington, because you don't have a slew of picks because Lattimore, and you're getting rid of first round picks. It's like, how many rookies they'd have? Very few. They'd have like a sixth and a something. Like I just feel like that could get really messy, where it could be Jaden Daniels and nobody very soon, where like injuries could, if Terry McLaurin gets injured, it's like, oh my God, what do we do?
Right.
So I'd be pretty concerned to be investing that much in a team where you've got a quarterback that's so young that you really got to build a team around him, not just put one player in there.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of teams in the NFL right now that are sort of in in that boat. That it's like Myles Garrett's available. Okay, obviously we're going to pick up the phone and call him and see what it takes. But also, outside of Buffalo, I'm looking at it like I don't necessarily see a team that it's like we have to go get him. Like have to go get him. You know, like you said, Tampa Bay. Would that be fun? Yes. I don't feel like Tampa Bay is a Myles Garrett away from winning a Super Bowl. You know, Seattle is not a Myles Garrett away from winning a Super Bowl. Detroit is not a Myles Garrett away from winning a Super Bowl.
I think Detroit could be. Detroit could be.
I think that would be a luxury. I think like they need to, like I said, they need to take care of their secondary first. You know, that's why I say I don't think they are, because I think they're good secondary play away from winning a Super Bowl. So yeah. So well, that was talking Myles Garrett and Cooper Kupp. We don't have a ton of time left. We're going to preview the Super Bowl a little bit. We did talk about it a little bit last week too. So I guess between the 2 weeks, we'll have done an accurate preview of it. So Nick, why don't you start us off with like, what do you think is the biggest storyline of this Super Bowl?
Biggest storyline, I definitely think, is Chiefs trying to three-peat right now. It feels like the Chiefs are the side that everybody is just so concerned with, that everybody's getting kind of sick of, that when everybody's looking at this, it's like, okay, Mahomes, like, he's so efficient. He makes the right play on third down. He gets the team into the right sets. He makes all the plays that you need. Andy Reid has such a variety of offensive plays. Steve Spagnuolo, every blitz, every time you need to dial something up, forces Josh Allen out of his comfort zone and really made him struggle in the AFC Championship. It feels like the Chiefs just have the better quarterback, the better coach, the better defensive coordinator. They've got Chris Jones, who's a stud. They've got Travis Kelce, who's played better as of late. I just feel like when you're talking about every single quarterback the Chiefs have played in the playoffs, it's like, okay, Tom Brady, they lost to. Okay, Joe Burrow, they lost to once. And everybody else, it's just a fear factor. It's just a mess of Jalen Hurts. Are you going to be able to get over him this time? You played well, but you had a critical fumble that was a disaster in the last Super Bowl. I just feel like to beat Patrick Mahomes in this Chiefs team, you'd need this Eagles team currently constructed, and you'd need to put like Jaden Daniels on it. You'd need to put like Josh Allen on it. To overcome this Chiefs team, you need an overwhelming amount of talent, and you need a hell of a quarterback orchestrating it. And I think Jalen Hurts is going to need to have a hell of a game. Saquon Barkley is going to need to have a hell of a game. These coordinators are going to need to step up here. You're going to need good offensive play calling, good defensive play calling to slow them down, especially in the red zone. And I just feel like the Chiefs are inevitable, and you need to really do something completely outside of the box to take care of that inevitability.
Yeah, I actually don't think that Jalen Hurts needs to have that great of a game. And I say that because of the statistic. I forget exactly what it is. But it is something along the lines of like in playoff games that the Eagles have won with Jalen Hurts. They have like he's like averaged like under 180 yards in those games. And in games that they've lost, that's when he's thrown like over 270, right? And which is really, really fascinating. And so I think Saquon Barkley is the key, man. I think everyone was like, oh, Saquon got, when Saquon got drafted, like, oh, he's going to the Big Apple, bright lights or whatever. And it's like, you know what? I'm done thinking about cities that guys play in as like, oh, this is the bright lights, right? It was the same thing when Aaron Rodgers went to the Jets. Oh, the bright lights, like Aaron Rodgers has played in a Super Bowl, right? He's played under the bright lights. This playing in the Super Bowl, way brighter lights for Saquon Barkley than all 4 of his or 5 or 6 of his seasons in New York combined, if you ask me. And so
Mhm.
I think Saquon Barkley is the key to the Eagles' success. I mean, the Eagles' defense is. I mean, I think it's the best in the NFL. The Chiefs' defense is really good, and Steve Spagnuolo is incredible. But I think if you just go pound for pound, player for player, the Eagles have a better defense. And so it's running the ball for the Eagles, and it's stopping the run, right? Like I think the Chiefs, because of Chris Jones, get more credit than they deserve at how good of a run defense they are. In the AFC Championship game, James Cook had 13 carries for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, only 85 yards, but he did it on 13 carries. That's like 6 yards per carry, right? Like, and that's James Cook. That's not Saquon Barkley. You know what I mean? And so I think the key to this game is getting Saquon going and getting him going early, so that Spags needs to deploy a little bit more help to stopping the run to give Jalen Hurts a little bit easier of a time throwing. But that doesn't mean give Hurts easier time throwing and so we stop running the ball. Just, okay, we can maybe throw the ball on first down every once in a while to surprise this defense. So, I mean, like you said, Chiefs three-peat is obviously the biggest storyline. No team has ever done it. In the modern, in modern sports, it's happened very, very few times, and like we said, never in the NFL. So that is the biggest storyline. But I think when it comes to the biggest storyline that comes to what's happening in the game, it is Saquon Barkley versus the Chiefs defense. Because if he can, and I think he could have a game similar to James Cook and they be okay because of how good the Eagles defense is, right? Like I think that this is going to be a lower scoring game. I'd be surprised if either team scores 30 plus points. Like I think this is going to be a 24-21 or 27-23 type game, just because of how good these teams are at running the ball and how good these defenses are. I don't think we're going to see super explosive offensive game, where we get like a 38-35 like we had last time. And so that's the way I see it. I think Saquon Barkley is the key to Eagles' success, assuming that the defense shows up and does what they always do. Saquon Barkley, if he plays the way that he has all the way through the playoffs, then the Eagles have no trouble.
So I got a different question to pose for you, Jack, that has to do with this. So, like, obviously Saquon could be the key to success. If he drops like a 180 bomb or something on the Chiefs, like the Eagles got a really, really, really good shot. But it seems like all the pressure's on the Eagles, that everybody's expecting the Chiefs to win, and the Eagles, if they do this, then they can upset the Chiefs. Like, it feels like all the pressure's on the Eagles. Saquon, obviously, we expect to have a good game. We think he's a key to the game. Who on the Eagles, though, can afford to have a bad game and they win despite it is my question. So where it's like, okay, Saquon has a great game. If Saquon has a great game, can Jalen have a bad game? Or does Jalen have to be just okay and they be okay? Who on the Eagles can afford to have a bad game? Can Lane Johnson have a bad game and they win? Can Jalen Carter have a bad game and they win? Like, who can have a bad game here? And despite it, the Eagles get success.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I see no way that the Eagles win this game if they turn the ball over. Like, seriously, I think if they turn the ball, I think even if they win the turnover battle, if they turn the ball over, it won't matter. Like, it's the facts. Like we've seen it. The Chiefs turned the ball over 2 times against the Bills in the AFC Championship game, and the Bills didn't turn the ball over at all, and they still lost, right? Like, you cannot afford to turn the ball over against the Kansas City Chiefs. It just can't happen. So that being said, I think that Jalen Hurts, as long as bad doesn't mean interceptions, it just means like, hey, he has a weird 14 for 29 passing type thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think that could happen, and they could still win. Like, despite that, if Saquon does what he does, I think there are a couple players on the defense. None of their corners can't afford to have a bad game, despite, the Chiefs' more weak wide receiver core. But I think CJ Gardner-Johnson, who personally is more talk than he is actual play. I think he could afford to have a bad game and that be okay. The Chiefs don't have a Tyreek Hill that if the safety has a bad play, well, they're going over the top because they've got the fastest dude on the field. So I think he could afford to have a bad game. Because I think even him getting beat isn't like, huge point altering, play type thing. But I think a lot of this Eagles team, and I mean, part of it seems like, oh, that's annoying because they're playing the Chiefs, but it's like, no, like if we take the Chiefs out of it, if it's just Team A and Team B, you're in the Super Bowl, right? Like you're in the Super Bowl, which means Team B, you're the best team in the NFC. Team A, you're the best team in the AFC, right? You shouldn't be able to win by playing a bad game, right? Like, you shouldn't. It's the reason that when we watched the Rams-Patriots game, like the Rams played a really, really bad game and they lost. And it's not like the Patriots played incredible, but they played well enough that they're like, if the Rams are going to play really, really bad, we can manage, right? So like when you're in the Super Bowl, you can't afford to have any errors, any mistakes. I think the Eagles definitely more than the Chiefs, it feels like, just from frequency of things lately. They need to play much more above reproach when it comes to what they're doing, especially their offensive linemen. Like you cannot give up a hold. You need to. I think the Eagles really need to sit down, and obviously they've been having their meetings, but be like the O-line room needs to sit down and be like, Jalen is a good enough runner, right? If a guy gets by us, we cannot afford to do anything that's going to look like a hold, because it's going to get called. There's been kind of viral mic'd up moment of Mike Shanahan going around lately, or not Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan going around lately, where from the Super Bowl last year, where he's like, I know that's a hold, but their guy's doing it on every single play. Just call it both ways, right? And it just seems like we keep having those moments with the Chiefs. Now, this is what happens whenever any dynasty is happening. I saw a really funny screenshot of a tweet that was like a Kansas City Chiefs like fan page, that it was like after they lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship, was like, we always knew it was going to be an uphill battle. It's hard to beat the Patriots and the referees. And then him also tweeting like, if you're saying that the refs are the reason the Chiefs win, then I'm sorry that you're part of the dumbest sector of football fans, or something like that. And it's like someone like screenshotted both, was like, is this you? So again, if we're taking outside noise, we're taking refs out of it. Like if we're just putting Team A versus Team B, you're in the Super Bowl and you got there for a reason because of how well you played. But you need to the level through the playoffs. That's the cool thing about playoffs in all sports, is it's like, as you proceed, the level gets harder, so the Commanders were a harder team to play against than the Rams, despite the way the score looked. But I think that had a lot to do with weather. The Rams were a harder team to beat than who did they play in the first round?
Is it the Packers?
The Packers, yeah. The Rams were a harder team to beat than the Packers, and now the Chiefs are going to be a harder team to beat than the Commanders, just sort of progressing their way up there.
Yeah. I assume you've seen in the last couple of weeks from that same AFC Championship, the 2018 one, you've seen the maps of like who everybody's rooting for, and it's New England being like the Patriots, and then everywhere else being like, go Chiefs. Yeah. And then now in the AFC Championship, it's everybody being like, go Bills, and then Kansas City right there in the middle. And just how times have changed. It's so crazy that going from being the underdog, trying to take down the dynasty, to becoming it, it's just completely kind of surreal looking back on it. Because I remember those days of, wow, Mahomes is the young, hot commodity, the one who could be like just insane, the best quarterback in the league, 50 touchdowns his first year starting. Oh, but Tom Brady and the Patriots, like, it's Tom Brady. He's inevitable. And now the Chiefs are inevitable. They are inevitable right now. I can only imagine if we got this year's Chiefs versus like that 2019 New England Patriots. Like, what if we got two unstoppable forces, two teams that get so much help from the refs, supposedly, two teams that have all buttoned up, their whole defense, their whole offense, get very few penalties on them as far as holds and false starts and all that stuff. Quarterbacks that are just in a groove. Like, I feel like we've never seen two dynasties just completely go at it in the peak of their prime of their powers. And that would just be incredible if we could see something like that. I just think that'd be unbelievable. But if one team's so dominant where they're at that point, like the Chiefs are, you can't have two at the same time. You can't have a 90s Bulls versus an 80s Lakers at the same time. It just doesn't happen. And you almost did in the 80s with Celtics Lakers. It was different, but
well, still. Even in the 90s, 90s Bulls versus 90s Jazz, like if Michael Jordan wasn't there, I think the Jazz could have had a three-peat in there because, Stockton and Malone. But yeah, definitely. There's always going to be the little brother. And the interesting thing is recently it's felt like the entire league has been, the Chiefs' little brother. But, we'll see. It took in the 2000s, it took the Giants beating the Patriots in a very unlikely way to make everyone else sort of realize, okay, all right, this team is like beatable. That's interesting, and then we had some more competition. So, Nick, what is your prediction for this Sunday, both winner and score?
So I definitely feel like I'm just going to continue riding with the Chiefs until they lose one of these playoff games, especially. I feel like the Eagles, obviously, as we've said, have so much more talent as far as top to bottom, defenses, offensive line, receivers, running back, except for the quarterback. If you flip these quarterbacks, it's completely different. But given the quarterback separation, that could be everything in this game. I'm going to ride with the Chiefs. It's the easy prediction. It's the easiest investment return on your money. As far as score, I feel like you're looking at like 24-20 Chiefs or something like that. I feel like you're looking at like, okay, the Chiefs are up by a big chunk and Jalen Hurts is having to drive down and like score 7 and really struggles because he couldn't get in there as far as to like have the field goal kicker make a kick. He has to score a touchdown and just like a clutch Chris Jones on a backup offensive lineman in the interior, something like that. So I feel like we're looking at like that middle kind of scoring range and a Chiefs win in the range of like 1 to 4 points. That's where I'm at with it. So I'll go 24-20 Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm going to say 26-23, and I think it'll be Kansas City. I'd like for it to be Philadelphia, and maybe that score with a number like 26 favors Philadelphia more because of the way they go for 2. But I think Kansas City's going to do it. I think we're going to see it, and I think I think if it happens, and we can talk more about this, after the fact, if the Chiefs do end up winning, I think if Mahomes wins the Super Bowl, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, even though he'll only be at 4 and Brady will be at 7, which is crazy. I think they'll be a lot. I think they'll be a lot closer than 3 championships away in the GOAT debate. So now I think my personal opinion when it's going to come to that is I think more than ever, I think everyone likes to in the NBA, LeBron to MJ, like the era debate. I certainly feel like that debate is far more warranted now with Brady and Mahomes. Because of the way that Brady actually got hit by people and, wasn't taking advantage of the rules a little bit. Again, give Mahomes all the respect for what he is capable of doing, but some of those trying to bait
the flops are crazy, man.
Yeah. So we'll see. But anyway, everybody enjoy the game this week. If you choose to watch it, if you're one of the hundreds of thousands that have decided you're boycotting, I don't necessarily blame you. I'm still going to watch it. Honestly, I think there is a chance that despite all these people that are claiming they're going to boycott, that viewership might not actually change that much, because I think there are going to be less Super Bowl parties, but there are going to be more people that are like, I don't want to get together and throw a whole party for the Super Bowl. It's a dumb Super Bowl. I'd rather just stay home and watch it by myself. I think we might see that a little bit. And of course, all the Swifties are going to be watching, because Taylor will be there and because Travis Kelce is probably going to propose if they win. So all of that. Yeah, I know. It's so silly.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Hey, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll be back next week to talk about it a little bit and to celebrate moving into the off season. So have a good one, y'all.